So here are the answers to the questions from the previous chapter. So why don't you pause the video, tick your answers off, and then go on to the next chapter, which is dissolved substance. Diffusion. Substances must enter and leave cells for the cell to function. And they do it by diffusion. Diffusion is the spreading out of particles from a high to a low concentration. You have to learn that definition. And you have to say spreading out of particles. You can't say spreading out of substances, liquids, gases. It has to be spreading out of particles. Particles is a key word. The rate of diffusion is affected by the concentration gradient. Now this is the difference in concentration between one area and another. The greater the difference, or the steeper the gradient, the faster diffusion happens. Rate of diffusion is also affected by temperature. The warmer it is, the more kinetic energy the molecules have, so the faster they diffuse. Oxygen diffuses into the cells. It diffuses through the cell membrane, then through the cytoplasm, and it diffuses to the mitochondria where it's used in respiration. So see if you can work out what will happen in the following situations. Explain in each case what will happen to the red particles and the blue particles and at what rate this will happen. So in this example, the blue particles won't diffuse. There'll be no net movement. Although they are moving around, there'll be no net movement because there's no concentration gradient. They're equally distributed. The red particles will diffuse from left to right reasonably fast. There is a concentration gradient. In this example, both blue and red particles will diffuse from right to left pretty fast because there's a steep concentration gradient. There's a big difference in concentration between the right-hand side and the left-hand side. In this example, blue will diffuse from right to left, not particularly fast, there isn't a big concentration gradient. Red will diffuse from left to right, reasonably fast because of the steepness of the concentration gradient. Tissues, organs and organ systems. Now let's look at animal organs first. Similar cells often work together to perform a specific function, and this is called a tissue. Different tissues often work together to perform a specific function, and this is called an organ. And different organs often work together to perform a specific function, and this is called an organ system, like the digestive system, the circulatory system, the reproductive system, and so on. So let's have a closer look at tissues. Now cells differentiate or specialise or become adapted in order to carry out a particular job. For example, sperm cells, nerve cells, leaf palisade cells, they all have special adaptations to carry out their job. Muscle cells are able to contract. They're the only cells that are able to contract, and they form muscular tissue. Glandular cells are able to secrete substances. So a group of glandular cells forms glandular tissue. And epithelial cells, these form epithelial tissue. This acts as a covering tissue for organs. Now an example of an organ containing several tissues is the stomach. Now you can see here the stomach is basically a bag-shaped organ. Food enters it from the gullet and it leaves via the small intestine, and there are several layers of tissue in the stomach wall. The innermost layer is epithelial and glandular tissue. The glandular tissue produces the digestive juices. The layer of muscle tissue contracts to churn the food and mix it up and help to break it down further. And there's a layer of epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is a covering tissue. It covers organs. Let's have a look at some organ systems. Plants have organs. They have flowers, leaves, stems, roots. Certain time of the year they might have fruits. And if they have organs, then they must have tissues because organs are made up of several different tissues. Let's have a look at the tissues that make up the leaf. The top and bottom of a leaf is covered by epidermal tissue, and this covers the leaf. The mesophyll tissue is the middle layers of the leaf. This is where the photosynthesizing cells are, where you'd find the leaf palisade cell. Xylem tissue, these are the blobs shown in red, these form long tubes which transport water and minerals along the leaf and up and down the stem. The phloem tissue, shown here in purple, again this forms long tubes, and the job of phloem tissue is to transport sugars and food substances along the leaf and up and down the stem. Let's have a look at the digestive system. We have different glands in the digestive system. The job of the glands is to produce digestive juices. So we've got one in the mouth, we've got the salivary glands just under the tongue. We also have the pancreas. This is located just beneath the stomach, and the job of the pancreas, being a gland, is to produce digestive juices. The gullet carries food to the stomach. The stomach and the small intestine both carry out digestion, which means that they break large insoluble food molecules into smaller soluble food molecules. The liver produces bile, which is needed for fat digestion. We'll look at that in more detail later on. The small intestine absorbs digested food, which means it passes into the bloodstream in the small intestine. And the large intestine absorbs water from the digested food. So we're left with the faeces, which is all the undigested food which passes out of the body through the anus. So the function of the digestive system is to exchange materials with the environment. We're absorbing materials from food. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. Here's some test questions to check your understanding.